I was declared clinically dead for over 13 minutes. No heartbeat, no brain activity. But I didn't fade into darkness. I woke up somewhere else, a place with no time, no pain, and no limits. I walked through cities not built by hands, saw beings made of pure energy, and lived an entire lifetime, maybe more, before anyone down here even knew I was gone. But what I saw next will stay with me forever. A review of my life so vivid, so raw, I became every person I had ever helped or hurt. Even the ant I stepped on as a child, I was that ant. And then I was told, "It's not your time. You must go back." What followed shattered everything I knew about consciousness, spirit guides, reincarnation, even reality itself. If you've ever felt like there's more to this life than what we see, you're right, and I'm about to show you why. My name is Dr. Linda Kramer, and I thank you so much for being here, truly. What I'm about to share isn't easy to put into words, but I've spent decades trying to find the language that does it justice. It begins on a cool spring morning, April 18th, 2004. I was living in a quiet suburb just outside of Boulder, Colorado, surrounded by pine trees and the distant hush of mountains. I woke up at exactly 3:12 a.m., startled but oddly calm. Something was different. Not wrong, just different. I remember getting up, walking to the bathroom with the intent to splash my face, maybe settle back down into sleep. But something happened in that bathroom. I never made it back to bed, my physical body, that is. The moment I collapsed, it was as if my awareness peeled away from my skin and floated gently upward. Without warning or transition, I was suddenly in the center of my living room, suspended above everything. I saw the couch, the books on the table, the lamp I forgot to turn off, everything, crystal clear. And I saw myself, or rather my body, no longer moving, no breath, no blink. Still. Then came the front door slamming open. My partner at the time, Marcus, came rushing in barefoot, clearly panicked. He hadn't been in the room when I collapsed. He said later he was awakened by a sound that didn't come from this world. A thunderous knock that echoed from the inside walls as if reality itself had shouted. But I hadn't made a sound. The paramedics were there fast, then more responders, firefighters, a sheriff, even a neighbor who must have seen the flashing lights. They surrounded my body, trying everything. I watched them from above, emotionless but deeply present. The time? The report later said I had no heartbeat or measurable brain activity for just over 13 minutes. Clinical death confirmed. As strange as it may sound, I felt no fear, no pain. The usual worries that plague us, bills, deadlines, missed calls, they meant nothing. I wasn't concerned about any of it. All I felt was stillness, a powerful, serene quiet that seemed to stretch beyond sound. And here's where things begin to truly defy logic. After the emergency responders wheeled my body away, I wasn't pulled with it. I remained, watching. Then came the shift. It wasn't a tunnel. It wasn't a light. It was more like a change in frequency, like turning a dial on an old radio and hearing a new station come in clearly. A presence entered the space. Dozens of glowing spheres of electric blue began to zip around me. They weren't chaotic. They were intelligent. They hovered, examined me, even seemed to communicate, though not with words. They had pure white centers that shimmered like sunlight on water. And then, all at once, they vanished, gone, as if carried on a breeze I couldn't feel. What followed was beyond breathtaking. I found myself standing in a meadow, but meadow hardly captures it. This place stretched into an endless horizon, every flower pulsing with light, every breeze whispering through blades of grass like a soft melody. Behind this field rose a mountainous wall, so massive, so impossibly high, it made the Himalayas look like garden stones. Beyond those peaks stood cities of light, towers of energy that shimmered like reflections on rippling water. Here's the most impossible part. I could see it all. Every angle, every detail, even behind me, above me, below me, like I had no fixed perspective. Sight wasn't through eyes, it was my awareness, and I knew without anyone telling me that I could move through this place however I chose. Want to explore the mountains? I was there. Curious about a distant structure? I arrived instantly. There was no time, only intention. For what felt like over a year, maybe 2, I walked, I explored, I transformed, I became a bird, I swam as a fish, I shifted into a child, then a tree. Every thought became form, and every form came with wisdom I didn't know I needed. There were no clocks in that place, but if I had to translate the experience into Earth time, I'd say I spent around 20 months there. I've always been logical, scientific. As a doctor, I've learned to measure, to quantify. So when I came back, I tried to calculate how long I was there based on the distance I walked. I remembered wandering over mountain ridges, through valleys, across bridges of pure white stone that glowed under my feet. In my human body, I walk maybe 4 or 5 miles an hour on a good day. There, I traveled thousands, if not in steps, then in understanding. But here's what made this place different than any dream, memory, or hallucination. I could become anything. One moment I was myself, my soul, I suppose, and the next I was watching a woman in a long robe walk through a corridor of marble. She had a face I didn't recognize, yet she felt familiar. I followed her out of curiosity, and suddenly I was her. I could feel the cool floor beneath her feet, my feet, and the warmth of the lantern she carried. I looked behind me and saw myself, Linda, watching her, watching me. And that's when I understood we are not just who we are right now. We are every version of ourselves that ever lived. I was that woman. I was her pain, her joy, her wisdom, her lifetime merged with mine. And the more people I observed, the more I became. A merchant from an ancient port city, a barefoot child running through olive groves, a monk kneeling in silence under falling snow. Each person gave me a fragment of something I hadn't known I was missing: compassion, patience, perspective. The deeper I went into this place, the more I understood what it means to be human and what it means to be more than human. Eventually, I felt a presence behind me. Not the orbs this time, not another being I could become, but someone familiar. A tap on the shoulder, soft and warm, just like a mother waking you up for school when you're young. I turned and saw her, the woman who's been with me ever since, my guide, my protector, my teacher. She didn't speak with her mouth. She never has. But I heard her clearly. It's time. Not go, not leave, just time. And I understood somehow that I wasn't being forced, but I was being shown the next step. She led me, if you could call it leading, to a massive cathedral floating between realms, as if built from the bones of stars. It had no real edges, no bricks or mortar, just energy shaped into something almost architectural. Inside there were rows of seats, larger than trees, made from wood I couldn't identify. And there, at the front, were 3 forms, light cascading upward from them, spiraling in ways I still can't explain. Not clockwise, not counter, just all directions at once. These beings didn't speak either, but they gave me one simple knowing. You must understand before you return. Before me appeared what I can only call a box, but it wasn't solid. It shimmered, and inside it were millions of glowing bubbles, each one a memory, a choice, an action, a moment from my life as Linda. And for each one, I had to enter it, not watch it, be it, live it again. The first memory was of me at 7 months old, sitting on the floor with my grandfather's dog. I had pulled its tail. It yelped and I had laughed. Now, here I was, again in that tiny body, looking out through tiny eyes. I could feel the fabric of my onesie, the fuzz of the dog's tail between my fingers. I experienced my infant curiosity, and then I became the dog. I felt the sting of pain, the betrayal, the surprise, not from a place of judgment, but understanding. This was not punishment, it was truth, and truth, when we face it fully, heals. Now, before we continue deeper into this journey, I want to ask something of you. Not the usual click here, smash that button kind of thing. No. If you felt anything while listening to this, if something inside you stirred or whispered, "I've felt that too," then I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Not because I want numbers, but because this space is for stories that change people. And if you've ever felt between worlds or like your life has a chapter no one else understands, share that below. Tell me what resonates with you. I read every comment. This isn't a monologue, this is a conversation. Each memory that came from that box was like a small flame, glowing in its own way, waiting to be understood. I didn't just revisit moments, I entered them, became them, and that's something I didn't expect. I assumed I'd be watching my life like a film reel, passive, distant, but no, this was full immersion, and each memory demanded truth, not excuse. I found myself back in my 20s during a heated argument with a friend. I saw myself through her eyes, how my words, though logical, cut too deep. I felt her confusion, her sense of abandonment, and when I shifted back into my perspective, I wasn't defensive. I didn't rationalize what I'd said, I simply understood. It was never about who was right. It was about what was real. Every bubble of memory carried with it layers, not just the action, but the intention. And not just mine, the intention of everyone involved. The review showed me how deeply interconnected we all are. One cruel glance can ripple for years in someone else's story. One gesture of kindness can soften a lifetime of grief. Some memories were easy. Laughing with my little brother as we built forts in the living room. That warmth, that joy, it expanded as I relived it. My heart swelled and I could feel that love spreading like light through every layer of my being. Others, not so easy. I was shown moments I'd long buried, times when I turned away from someone who needed me, times when I let fear or pride win, and I didn't get to skip past them. I had to feel what those moments did, not just to me, but to the others involved. One of the most humbling memories was of a time I stepped over a line of ants as a child and deliberately stepped back on one. I thought it was silly at the time, but in the review I became that ant. Yes, I know how that sounds, but it's the truth. I felt the vibration of the ground, the size of the shadow above me, and the terror of a life about to end. It wasn't dramatized, it wasn't exaggerated, it was simply what it was. And it taught me one of the most valuable truths I've ever come to know. Every life matters. Every experience, no matter how small, echoes. The process wasn't fast. There was no sense of time, no ticking clock. I reviewed what must have been thousands of memories. Some were so old I had no conscious recollection of them. But there they were, preserved in that field of experience. And as I faced each one, something amazing happened. Once a memory was fully understood, once all perspectives were honored and every emotional layer was felt, it simply dissolved. The orb would shimmer, pulse, and then vanish, like a lesson finally learned. It wasn't erased, it was resolved. integrated, healed. There were no judges in that place, no punishments, just truth and the opportunity to grow through it. After what felt like years in that sacred space, I sensed another presence behind me. It was her again, the woman who tapped my shoulder earlier. She hadn't aged. In fact, she couldn't age. She was part of something eternal, woven into my existence. And this time her energy had shifted. It felt more urgent. She didn't need to say the words. I knew what was coming. I had to go. My work wasn't finished. I wasn't scared. I wasn't resistant. But I felt something I hadn't expected. Grief. I didn't want to leave. There's something that happens when you shed the density of the physical world. When you live in a realm built on intention and harmony. You don't miss anything from before. But when you're told you have to return, suddenly everything you left behind comes flooding back. Not just the pain, but the purpose. She reached out and held my hand. Not physically, but energetically. And I felt all my strength return. I was ready, at least as ready as one could be. But before I could even ask how this transition would happen, everything shifted again. No sound, no flash, just a new space, pure white, boundless. A place I now call the White Room. The White Room wasn't like anything I had experienced so far. It wasn't made of anything. No walls, no ceiling, no temperature, no sound. It wasn't even white in the way you'd describe a clean sheet or a blank screen. It was light that seemed to think. A living, conscious brightness that wrapped around me but never pressed down. I could sense its curiosity, like it was waiting for something to happen, waiting for me to remember why I was there. Then, far in the distance, though distance meant nothing in this place, I saw a figure. She was small at first, the size of a child's toy, but as she approached, she grew. Not just in size, but in presence. She didn't walk, not really. There was no floor beneath her, but she moved with purpose, grace, and frustration. It was in the way she approached me, like a parent scolding a child who had wandered too far. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice didn't come from her mouth. It just arrived, fully formed in my awareness. "This isn't your time." I felt no fear, just curiosity. "Then where am I?" I asked, though I'm not sure if the words came out or were simply known. "You've stepped outside your path," she replied, crossing the empty space until she stood directly in front of me. She wasn't angry in a cruel way, just fiercely protective. "You're not supposed to be here yet. There's still work for you." She paused, then tilted her head slightly and softened her expression. "I'm your great-great-great-great-grandmother. Call me Celeste." I blinked, or tried to. The motion didn't work quite the same in that realm. "What?" Celeste smiled, not with her lips but with her entire presence. She was luminous, dressed in layers of faded green and cream-colored fabric, like something sewn by hand in another century. She felt like home and thunder at once. "I was born in 1812, in a valley carved from river stone," she said. "We had nothing but the earth and each other. My hands built the walls of our home. My breath warmed my children in winter." Her words painted pictures so vivid I could smell the wood smoke, hear the churn of a water wheel down a distant stream. She spoke of her life in exquisite detail, how she and her husband would take an entire day just to cut down one tree for firewood, how each piece of clothing had to be sewn from wool that they sheared, cleaned, and spun themselves. She spoke with pride, not of accomplishment but of endurance, of resilience passed down like a thread through generations. I listened. I absorbed. There was no way to stop her, and no desire to try. She told me about her children, how she buried 2 of them before their 5th birthdays, how she used to sit under a willow tree after sunset and hum songs no one else ever heard. She described the old tools they used to wash their clothes, built from stone and salvaged wood. "We didn't wash just garments," she said. "We washed away grief, soaked away doubt." And I understood this wasn't just a story. This was instruction. She wasn't filling the silence. She was grounding me, giving me weight, teaching me the language of ancestry, of soul lineage. And then she changed course. "I've seen the path you walk," she said. "You've wandered far from your source, but not beyond reach. You still have work to do. There's still purpose, and you must return to your homeland." She didn't mean a country. She meant my soul's terrain. Celeste told me that the work I would do, though I didn't yet understand it, would touch lives beyond my own. She spoke of future roles I'd take, people I'd help, truths I'd teach. And then, with striking precision, she described the years ahead of me. "You will serve with law enforcement," she said. "A decade of order, structure, discipline." I nodded slowly, though the idea seemed impossible at the time. Then 2 years in silence, reflection, a necessary retreat. Again, I didn't know why, but I accepted it. "And after," she continued, "you will teach, not just knowledge, but healing. You will awaken others." I remember feeling a deep ache in that moment. Not sorrow, but awe. It was the feeling of remembering who you've always been. She reached out, without moving, and touched me. And just like before, everything changed again. When her hand touched me, if you could call it a hand or a touch, the white room began to dissolve. Not with drama, not in a flash. It simply faded like mist and something new emerged. A cathedral. It was unlike anything our world could craft. It floated, anchored in no soil, built from no stone. It was immense, but not because of its size. It was immense because of its energy. There were no solid walls, yet it had form. And its form made me feel very small, but not unworthy. It was like standing in a truth far older and wider than time. The inside of this place was sacred. Not sacred in the religious sense we know, but in a way that went deeper. The kind of sacred you feel when you hold a dying animal, or when a newborn baby wraps its fingers around yours. That kind of reverence. I walked or floated through aisles flanked by enormous seats, not pews like in churches, but towering wooden carvings, so intricate they looked woven from the breath of trees that had lived for centuries. No tree on earth could have been shaped like this. They curved, arched, danced in frozen movement, and they radiated memory. At the front, 3 beings waited. They weren't standing, they simply were. Pure energy, flowing, humming, not like music but like consciousness in motion. The force that makes stars burn and oceans rise, that's what they were made of. Their light moved in every direction at once. It didn't spiral like a storm, nor shoot like lightning. It rose, cascaded upward like a waterfall in reverse, and the motion twisted, circled, unfurled in patterns I don't have a vocabulary to describe. The longer I looked, the more the energy moved in every possible pattern at the same time. They didn't speak, not aloud, but they reached into me with intention, with knowing. I understood without words that this next phase was important, necessary. I wasn't returning yet. I had something else to face. Before me appeared what I can only call a vessel. It looked like a container, a sacred archive. Inside were orbs, millions it seemed. Each one pulsed gently with light, and I knew instantly that they were my memories, my choices, my thoughts, my intentions, every single one. The beings never judged. There was no courtroom here, no throne, only presence. They stood or existed as observers and mirrors. I would be the only one interpreting what I saw. This was my life review. I approached the first orb. It flickered, shimmered, then opened like a window. And there I was, 5 years old, at a park, watching a boy cry because someone had taken his toy. I remembered what I had done. I had walked away. I didn't help him. Now, I was inside that moment again. I became the child who walked away. Myself. I felt my confusion, my guilt, my silent urge to help but not knowing how. Then I became the boy, the one left behind. I felt his pain, his shame, the way that moment etched itself into his view of the world. It was so small, yet it was everything. I understood something then. There are no small moments. One by one, I moved through these orbs. Some were kind, a hand extended to someone who needed help, a conversation that changed someone's decision, a smile that saved someone's dark day, though I'd never known. Those experiences wrapped me in light. They made me feel expanded. Others broke me open. Arguments, dismissals, moments where I chose to protect my pride instead of open my heart. Moments where I said nothing when someone needed to hear anything. These orbs made me weep, not because I was being punished, but because I could feel what others had felt. I was them. I was me. I was the space between. This review went on, and yet I felt no fatigue. Each memory, once fully understood, faded into light and was gone, not erased, healed. It was never about punishment. It was always about perspective, understanding, evolution. I don't know how long I stayed there, months, years, in earth time, maybe minutes, but I healed thousands of moments, and each healing made me feel more whole, like I was stitching myself back together with threads of truth. And just as I began to wonder if there was an end to it, I felt it again, that familiar tap on my shoulder. She had returned. When I turned to face her again, her energy was softer than before, still firm, still anchored in purpose, but now there was something else in her presence, a sort of gravity, as if she carried the weight of the decision I was about to make. She didn't need to say anything. I already understood. This was the moment of choice. Celeste extended her hand, not as a command, but as an offering. I took it, and once again, everything changed. This time, I was no longer in the cathedral, nor the white room, nor the flowered fields. I was in a space that defied all my senses because it had none. There was no up or down, no air or space, but there was direction, and ahead of me stood something extraordinary. It was what I now refer to as the passage, not a tunnel, not a gate, a movement of space and energy shaped like a flowing corridor of light. It pulsed with intention, almost breathing in and out with a rhythm that felt older than the stars. I couldn't see the end of it, but I didn't need to. I knew what it was. It was the path of return, not to earth, but to a new incarnation. This was the gateway to reincarnation, and the moment I looked into it, I understood what Celeste had meant when she said, "Don't go in there unless you're ready to never go back." She placed herself between me and that passage. Her energy shifted again, more serious now, more protective. "You could go through," she said. "You'd begin again. New body, new name, no memory of this life. But it's not your time, and you know that." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Every part of me felt the truth. If I stepped into that corridor, I would be reborn somewhere else, to someone else, and everything I had just learned would be reset, stored deep in the soul, unreachable for a time. And then she did something I'll never forget. She raised her hand and, with the gentlest motion, turned my body away from the tunnel. Not forcefully, lovingly, as if to say, "You've come far enough to know why you need to return." We stood together for a long moment, facing the other direction. Then she began to speak, not about the past, not about my life, but about what would come. Her voice was steady, prophetic. There was no ambiguity in her words. "You will go back," she said, "and your body will not be as it was. It will hurt, it will struggle, but you'll remember." She was right. "You'll work with the law for 10 years, she continued, "not to punish, but to understand. You'll see pain, disconnection, corruption, but you'll also see courage and light in unexpected places." I nodded. Somewhere inside, the pieces were beginning to click into place. "Then," she said, "you'll need time away. 2 full years to let the damage settle, to remember how to breathe without flinching." I didn't know what kind of damage she meant, but I knew I would understand when it arrived. "And after that," she added with something that almost resembled a smile, "you'll teach. You'll touch lives. You'll help others remember who they are." It wasn't said like a prophecy. It was more like a map being unfolded. She stepped back then, and slowly a doorway appeared behind me. Not a door with hinges and handles, but an entry of sensation, a crack in the boundary between that realm and this one. Through it, I could feel everything waiting for me. The weight of gravity, the noise of traffic, the density of flesh, the ache of being human. For a brief moment, I hesitated, not from fear, but from reverence. To return to a world of sharp edges after having existed in one of infinite softness, that takes courage, but I knew I had it. The last thing Celeste said to me before I passed through was not advice. It wasn't a warning. It was simple. "We'll meet again." And then she vanished. Not into darkness, just into everywhere. Crossing back wasn't like falling or flying. It wasn't motion at all, not in the way we understand it. It was like breathing in and waking up at the same time. Only the breath was through layers of light, and the waking was into a density I had forgotten existed. The first thing I remember was pain. Not sharp or sudden, but thick, like being wrapped in wet wool. My chest burned, my limbs felt heavy and unresponsive, and my thoughts struggled to fit back into language. I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by blinking lights, quiet footsteps, and a sterile stillness that felt foreign. Someone was near me, a nurse. She wore a light blue uniform, and her hair was tied back. She noticed I was awake and leaned over gently, speaking softly. I couldn't understand her words at first. My mind was still shaped by the silence and telepathy of where I had just been. Sound was almost an assault, and then I asked her something that startled both of us. "How is Ashton?" I said. She froze. Her hand stopped midair, and she leaned in closer. "What did you say?" "Your cat," I whispered. "Gray fur, elderly. His kidneys are failing. You're thinking about the treatment plan. The medication is expensive. You're not sure if he'll make it through the month." She stared at me like I'd spoken in tongues. Her lips parted, but nothing came out for a moment. Then she said, "I haven't mentioned Ashton to anyone here. I work on a different floor. You've been in ICU for 6 days." I had no explanation to offer her, not one that would make any earthly sense. But I saw it in her eyes, belief mixed with wonder and a touch of fear. She backed away slowly, nodding, then left the room to gather herself. From that moment, everything around me felt strange, too loud, too sharp. The angles of the furniture, the colors of the walls, even the sensation of lying on a bed. It all felt alien. For a long while, I didn't know how to exist in this form. My body, which had been lifeless for minutes, possibly hours, was now clumsy and foreign. Simple things were suddenly overwhelming. Breathing felt unnatural. I had to ask how to do it. I'd forgotten the mechanics of it, how to inhale, when to exhale. Eating was even more confusing. I looked at the food on the tray beside me, and genuinely asked the nurse, "What do I do with this?" She thought I was joking, but I wasn't. Chewing, swallowing, blinking, using the bathroom, I had to relearn it all. Not because of brain damage, my faculties were intact, but because my soul had spent too long in a place where none of those things were necessary. Everything here had weight again, not just physical mass, but emotional gravity. On the drive home from the hospital, I remember watching the world pass by through the car window, the highway, the buildings, the people walking on sidewalks. It all felt exaggerated, like I was looking at a simulation stretched too wide. I asked the driver why he was in the middle of the road. He looked at me, confused. "I'm in my lane," he said. "But the line is over there," I said, pointing. "It's hundreds of meters away." To me, the road was massive, distorted. The physical space no longer aligned with how I remembered spatial awareness. The world felt too large and too small at once. A 10-minute drive felt like hours, and when we pulled into my neighborhood, the houses looked wrong, flat, untextured. The sky above felt like a painted ceiling rather than an endless canvas. I was back, yes, but not fully. The integration would take time. And there was another shift I hadn't anticipated. Everything spoke to me, not with words, but with vibration. The trees outside my window pulsed with energy. Furniture had character. Even water had moods. My necklace shimmered with warmth some days and dulled with silence on others. I began to understand that everything, absolutely everything, is alive in its own way. I wasn't psychic before, but I was now. It didn't take long for the visions to start. I'd be in the kitchen washing a dish, and suddenly a person would appear, standing there as if they had always belonged in that space. A woman in worn robes with ash on her face, a child holding a lantern, an old man with eyes full of sorrow and hands like driftwood. They wouldn't speak with mouths, but I understood them completely. I began to notice patterns, how they arrived, what they carried, the way they watched me as if they'd been waiting years for someone to see them. Some wanted help, some just wanted to be witnessed, some didn't even know they were no longer living. At first, I thought I was hallucinating, that maybe the trauma of death and return had fractured something inside me. But the experiences weren't erratic. They weren't intrusive. They were clear, organized, and strangely natural, like remembering a language I'd once spoken fluently as a child. So I began to write. I filled journals with descriptions, messages, symbols, fragments of stories whispered by these beings. I drew what I saw, fields with glowing petals, the 3 beings from the cathedral, even the orbs that danced around me before I crossed into the flowered realm. I drew Celeste, her face, her posture, the way she hovered between the realms like someone walking between pages of a book. I drew the tunnel too, the one she warned me not to enter. And it wasn't dark, not in the way we think of darkness. It was magnetic. It called to the parts of us we don't even know are listening. A call that can only be answered by surrender. The more I drew, the more I remembered. My mind had stored these images, but it was my spirit that held the meanings. And when I would look back on the drawings, days or even weeks later, I'd remember more. Whole conversations, lessons, moments from the life review that had been too emotionally intense to process all at once. That's when the dreams began. Not dreams in the normal sense. These were fully conscious experiences. Sometimes I'd find myself waking in bed and still seeing another world overlaid on top of mine. I'd walk through my house and find doors where none should be. Rooms I hadn't seen since childhood. People from past lives stepping out of mirrors or emerging from photographs. Some nights, I would sit outside and talk to the stars, not metaphorically. I would actually speak, and the sky would respond. A breeze would rise from nowhere when I asked a question. A sudden warmth would wrap around me when I said something true. The veil was thinner than I'd ever imagined. Or maybe it wasn't thinner. Maybe I was finally transparent enough to see through it. My intuition sharpened into something undeniable. I could feel when someone was about to call. I'd hum a song and hear it begin on the radio moments later. I'd walk into a room and instantly know the emotional history of what had happened there days before. It was like walking through an ocean of signals and finally knowing how to read the current. But it wasn't just perception, it was purpose. And that purpose took shape exactly as Celeste had said it would. I found myself drawn, almost pulled into service with law enforcement. Not as a detective or a forensics expert, but in administration, behind the scenes, supporting the system. 10 years, almost to the day. During that time, I saw things that would break most people, things that forced me to confront human suffering in its most raw and real forms. But I also saw moments of redemption. Officers who risked their lives not for glory, but because they couldn't do anything else. Victims who smiled through pain because they still believed in good. People whose stories reminded me of the orbs in that memory vault, each one waiting to be seen and healed. And when those 10 years came to a close, so did my ability to ignore what I had returned with. When I finally left my position with the police, it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. I didn't realize how much of myself I had been keeping restrained just to function in a world that no longer quite fit. The structure, the schedules, the constant nearness to trauma. It had served its purpose, yes, but now it was time to let the pressure release. Just as Celeste said, I took 2 years away from everything. During that time, I barely recognized who I was becoming. And that was the gift. I spent months in solitude, walking near rivers, sitting in gardens, listening to the birds speak in frequencies I had once ignored. I read ancient texts not for study, but because the words felt like home. I journaled until my wrists ached, pulling insights from places within me that didn't belong to this lifetime alone. Then, one morning, I woke up and simply knew it was time to teach. And not just theory or skills. I wasn't meant to go back to a lecture hall or university. I was meant to teach something deeper, something more vital. But first, I needed a bridge, something to ease me back into interaction with people. That's when the opportunity came to become a first aid trainer. It made sense in the most spiritual way. After everything I had seen, everything I had healed, now I was helping others learn how to save lives, not metaphorically, literally. And in doing so, I learned the rhythm of people again, their nervous laughter, their worry about doing things right, their pride when they passed. For 2 years I taught, and for 2 years I listened. That's when the spirit guides started coming. At first, it was subtle, a flash of an image in my peripheral vision, a voice in my dreams that didn't sound like mine. Then it became undeniable. They stood beside my clients as I spoke. They showed me details I couldn't possibly know, names, pets, childhood events, even phrases they hadn't said in decades. I began to describe them. "There's a woman here," I'd say gently. "She has curly red hair and is wearing a dress with sunflowers." Or, "Did you once have a rabbit named Bluebell? She's hopping around your ankles right now." More often than not, people would cry, sometimes laugh, sometimes stare in silence, but always they recognized. Over time, I met guides who defied expectation. Not all were human. One afternoon, an 80-foot pterodactyl appeared in my backyard. Its wings stretched wider than the house, and its eyes were deep with a wisdom that belonged to something far older than mammals. Other days, monks would appear in the corners of my home, offering silence. Once, a woman in patchwork skirts and beads showed up in my office, speaking with the rhythm and slang of the 1960s. She told me her name had once been Clover and that she had danced barefoot at a music festival under the stars. She smelled of wild herbs and freedom. Animals came too. A brown bear stood beside me during a particularly difficult reading, not threatening but commanding. A gerbil scurried across my kitchen tiles one night, leaving behind a feeling of childlike joy. A lion appeared in meditation, its mane made of solar flares. These were not figments, they were frequencies, and I could now tune in like an antenna, finely calibrated after years of interference. At first, I questioned everything. Was this real? Was my mind embellishing the strange return I had gone through? But the validation came fast. Clients confirming details. Moments later, strangers emailing me about things I had seen in dreams I hadn't yet shared. And above all, the overwhelming sense of alignment inside me. I wasn't seeking attention. I was delivering messages. With all of this unfolding, I realized I needed to document more than just my story. I needed to explain how it works, why some spirits stay, why others move on, what our consciousness does between lifetimes, and how we are meant to grow through it. So I wrote. One book became two. Two became a library. I wrote about ghosts, about psychic abilities, about spirit guides. Each page felt like a continuation of the journey I had started the moment I left my body in that bathroom all those years ago. And the truth is, my journey hadn't ended. It had only just begun. Now, living back in this world with its clocks and traffic and tangled routines, I often feel like I exist in two places at once. There's the version of me that goes grocery shopping, answers emails, forgets to water the plants. And then there's the other me, the one who remembers what it's like to fly without wings, to speak without sound, to become a memory and heal it into light. And the thing is, both versions are real. One doesn't cancel the other. We are meant to hold both. This dual awareness has made my life incredibly rich, but also deeply humbling. Because when you've spent what feels like 5 years in the presence of pure love, when you've watched yourself from outside your own lifetime, it becomes impossible to go back to sleep. You carry awareness with you, like a second heartbeat. And with that awareness comes responsibility. Not the heavy kind, the sacred kind. I now spend my days not trying to be perfect, but trying to be present. To listen to the person who just needed someone to ask how they really are. To tell someone that their grief is real and that healing doesn't have to be rushed. To help others understand that death isn't an end and that consciousness doesn't belong to the body. It only visits. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this. We don't have to die to begin our transformation. We can start right now with a single memory, with a single moment of forgiveness, with a single breath that says, I'm here, I'm ready to live awake. So if my journey has stirred something in you, if you've had dreams that felt too real, or if you've ever looked at the sky and felt like someone was looking back, I want you to know you're not alone. This space we've created here, this small corner of the internet, it's not just mine, it's ours. And now, from my heart to yours, I want to invite you to stay connected. If this story resonated with you, if it moved something deep inside, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Not because I want followers, but because I want fellow travelers, souls who are on the path of remembering, people like you who know there's more to life, more to death, more to everything in between. And I would be truly honored if you shared your story too. In the comments below, tell us what you've experienced. Tell us about a dream, a moment, a message, something that no one else has ever quite understood. You don't have to explain it perfectly. Just share it. Because I promise you, there's someone out there who needs to hear it. And if something in this story helped you, maybe it brought you peace or clarity or even a new question, I'd love to hear what it was. What did you take from this? What opened inside you? Let's make this more than a video. Let's make it a meeting place, a small sacred room where stories echo and healing begins. Because if I've learned anything since coming back, it's that we're all in this together. Seen or unseen, living or past, dreaming or fully awake, our souls are always walking home. And sometimes it just takes someone else's story to remind us of our own. Thank you for walking with me today. Until next time, Linda.